instead?
There, that's fine. This is all I need right
I've
here.
got the piano, so I can't accordion back here.
Okay, I got
I mean,
it.
you know,
I'm good.
I don't know, he told us to stand here and he was gonna give
We're
us directions and
still
he left.
accordioned a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Well, he did not know we were down there.
I don't think he
Because
noticed.
Jenny was standing up there, and I went there, and he goes, "That's not where she was." I went, "Yeah, we were
Yeah,
straight
I was
across
here.
from me." Yeah.
But then he told us to stand up here.
Yeah, I just,
We have to have room for the music.
I think he's moved on to the person who's streaming.
I think we're done.
Okay, we're good.
That's all we're doing. Standing.
Yeah.
It's not like we're going far.
Really?
20 years ago, I was the guy. 20 years ago, I was the guy to, although I wasn't very objective, Danny would probably be better. But Danny, you familiar with Eastman?
Yeah, oh yeah. I got
Isn't that a good deal?
Oh yeah, they're fantastic.
That's what I have. I have an Eastman fan. Also Kentucky, Brandon.
Yeah, they're good. They've got they're an A style. Yeah, these are the best
Good morning. Hold on 1 minute. And welcome to the Community Church of Chapel Hill, Unitarian Universalist. I'm Kathy Putnam, and I'm a member of the Worship Associates ministry here at the church. Whoever you are, whomever you love, however you arrived at this beloved place, you are welcome here. I especially want to welcome any visitors or newcomers to our church and call your attention to the special note for you, Welcome Guests and Newcomers, which is on the back of your order of service. Now, I want to mention a few things to keep in mind this morning. We're masking inside on Sunday mornings as a way of striving to be an inclusive community. We are not currently passing the offering baskets, so please place your donation in the offering baskets as you enter or exit the sanctuary. For those at home, please make your donations online. After the service, please join us for a period of fellowship during the Sunday social in the courtyard, just outside the main entrance. The area is mask optional and will have a cart with coffee and tea available. And you may want to check out the tables there with information from the groups mentioned in your order of service this morning. The other area where masking is mandatory is behind the Jones Building and includes the porch, grassy area, and playground. The online Sunday small group social, hosted by Rachel Rose, will begin at 11:30. The Zoom link is in the Sunday service email. And now please turn off or silence any cell phones during our service to maintain a worshipful experience. And now we'll hear a special announcement from Glenn Murbach.
Good morning. I'm here to talk about the annual music gala. We've had back live and in person in the sanctuary for the first time in 2 years. We've had 2 virtual music galas, which have been lots of fun, but there's nothing like getting everybody together in person. We're going to be doing that again this year. And also, we are going to be live streaming it just like we do the services. So the people who still don't feel they can join us in the sanctuary can also watch live streamed at home. And the name of the gala this year is Space, the Final Frontier, with 2 U's. We have actually a lot of U's in the title this year. Space, the Final Frontier, music that's out there. The idea is I gave all the musicians in the congregation the idea of choosing something that has to do with space or the planets or in any way you may, all the way from Here Comes the Sun to Venus, I think, which is kind of about space, but really about a woman's name, but that's okay. So we're kind of keeping the borders open for this a lot. I know we have an astrophysicist in the congregation that is going to delight us with the song as well. And we have songs about eclipses. You can kind of guess which song that might be, Eclipses of the Heart. And I've encouraged people to collaborate, so we have some wonderful, unique collaborations this year. For instance, I think Danny Gotham is going to be making his premiere as a bass in a barbershop quartet this year. So you can look forward to that with a song about the moon. Lots of songs about the moon, too. And I think the choir is going to sing a medley of songs about satellites and telstars and things like that. So it's here on April 30th at 7 p.m. in the sanctuary. And we're asking about $20 donation. It's free and open to the public, but a $20 donation suggested, and that will go to help with the AV in the church and help with creating funds for the live stream and personnel to run the live stream. And then also, if it's a nice evening, we haven't decided completely. We're going to see what the next couple weeks bring, but we'd like to have maybe desserts in the courtyard afterwards, where we maybe can have some desserts that we could purchase in the Jones Building and then come out to eat them in the courtyard. So 7:30 on Saturday, 7 p.m. on Saturday. Does anybody know? I don't know. So let's see. It says right here, the event will take place on Saturday, April 30th at 7 p.m. in the sanctuary.
And now please stand in body or spirit for our opening hymn, 153, I Woke Up This Morning. But it is not a celebration. This morning, we tell the important story of events which happened in this town 75 years ago this week. As you hear the story, you'll hear familiar names, important names in the history of this beloved community. As you hear the story, it may be tempting to think, he's the hero in this story. It may be tempting to think, we were on the right side. But this morning is not a celebration. It is a commemoration. This morning's story is also about shameful moments in our town's history. It is about the shameful legacies of racism and segregation. It requires us to search ourselves and our communities. It requires us to ask anew, what does my faith require of me? Come, In this spirit of searching, let us worship together. You'll find the words to our chalice lighting in your order of service, and if you wish to do so, please join me in reading them. We light this chalice, this faith, alive in this world, naming our vision of collective liberation and daring to remember each other into beloved community.
A transition from a rousing anthem to hard sharing. Before we do Joys and Sorrows, I want to place the first stone this morning for Reverend Charlie Cast, our beloved minister emeritus of this church. Charlie served as minister from 1994 to 2006 and has been here since that time involved. On Tuesday afternoon, Charlie suffered a very significant stroke. I sent out an email about this on Thursday afternoon. Charlie remains in the ICU, in the neurosciences ICU at UNC Hospital. I visited daily, and we have a team of visitors from the church who have been keeping him company and at the right level, we think, of not too much visit and not too little. But it is very hard, and so I ask you all for your prayers and your warm thoughts and your caring concerns for Charlie and for this community. And when there is a time to put out the call for there to be things to do, we will make that call and have an opportunity for everyone to help out and engage. But now we're in the time of waiting and watching, and if you're a person who has a long relationship with Charlie and wants to go by for a visit, I'm keeping the schedule of the visits, so you can get in touch with me, and we'll be regularly updating the community on how he progresses. So let's take a moment to hold Reverend Cast, Charlie, in our hearts. Each week we hold a time in our service for the sharing of our joys and sorrows, the significant personal joys and sorrows of our lives. As I invite you, if you have a joy or a sorrow to share, you're invited to come forward. Place a stone in the bowl. Share in a few sentences your joy or your sorrow. Let us enter into this sacred time of trust. Are there any joys and sorrows this morning? Please come forward.
Good morning, I'm Jane Proven. My husband Scott's not here this morning, but this is a joy I've been wanting to share for a while. I never believed it was really going to happen, but it is. And that is that our middle of our three sons, Christopher, who grew up in this church, and his wife and three adorable boys have decided to move back to Chapel Hill. We are still stunned. And they managed to find a house here off the market in this crazy market, and they closed on it this past week. They're not moving till July, till the school year is over. And they also managed to get a contract on their home up in Leesburg, Virginia last week. So we are very, very happy.
Good morning, I'm Jenna Kaizen. I have two stones today. One is for joy for my daughter, Raina. She is graduating from high school this year and hopes to work in herbal medicines. She has an internship in the mountains that starts in the fall, and she has gotten a great summer job that is a perfect fit for her at Sunrise Community Farms, where she'll be leading children in learning about foraging and growing vegetables, and they are allowing her to live there at the farm, and she has this lovely little setup where she gets to overlook the gardens and work with kids and do what she loves. So that's my joy, and my concern is for my dad, Ernie Rogers. He lives in Massachusetts and Cape Cod, and on Thursday he had his second surgery in 4 months for complications with diverticulitis, and he's not been able to eat solid food for about 4 or 5 months. He's now on a feeding tube, and he's lost a lot of weight, and he's disheartened. Yesterday he had probably his hardest day of this whole process, so thoughts and prayers for him. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sarah Clark Farnell, and last week I shared that I was presenting my final paper for my Master of Divinity, and I did present it, and I passed. Yeah, so it's a big deal, and now what I have left is something called CPE. It's Clinical Pastoral Education. It's basically working as a chaplain, and I'm hoping to do that next year. So graduation may be like a year from now, which is almost 10 years coming. So yeah, thank you.
I'm Mark Silling, this is Susan Heyman, and on April 4th, my son and her stepson, Andy, presented us with their second child, Isabel Silling, and we're extremely pleased about that. And that may be all we get from them, so I'm going to have to really enjoy it.
Hi, I'm Sam Brooks. And I have a joy. Tomorrow, my oldest son, Mark, who lives in Connecticut, will be coming with his family. He has 9-year-old twins and a wife. And he's coming because he loves his mother. Or because I've been storing his 26-foot ski boat in my garage all winter. Because you don't need a ski boat in Connecticut in the winter. But I told him he has got to take me to the lake or he will not be able to afford the charge I'm going to charge for warehousing his boat.
A final stone is placed for all the joys and the sorrows that live in our hearts that were not spoken this morning. Would you join with me in a time of prayer and meditation? Spirit of life, source of our being and our becoming, God, present within us in that inner light and inner flame. God present in the world, in history, in the spirit of love and liberation. We come this morning bearing the joys and sorrows of our lives. Facing illness and struggle. Rejoicing for accomplishment. Awed and humbled by the wonder of new life. And grieving and afraid for the challenges that we face. May we respond with generosity and courage, compassion, and care. Help us to reach out beyond ourselves across that small space that is always between us, to comfort or congratulate, to care or rejoice. Remind us that we are each other's keepers, each other's support. In this spirit, may the prayers of our own hearts join with the prayers of our community as we hold a few moments of silence together. I invite you to be still for a time. Amen. Blessed be. I invite you to turn in your hymnals to number 168. One more step. We're going to remain seated as we sing together.
The reading this morning is from Bayard Rustin. Rustin was an artist, civil rights leader, peace activist, labor organizer, and LGBT activist. He advised Martin Luther King Jr. on nonviolent tactics and organized the 1963 March on Washington. However, as a gay man, he was not allowed the same public leadership opportunities as other icons of the civil rights movement. Listen to his words from a letter he wrote in 1944. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus pointed to the fact that segregation is unchristian because it leads to a set of conditions which encourage unequal treatment. Modern sociologists agree that segregation is, in most cases, tantamount to discrimination. Therefore, both morally and practically, segregation is to me a basic injustice and a denial of the hopes for America. Since I believe it to be so, I must attempt to remove it. There are 4 ways one can deal with an injustice. One can accept it without protest. One can seek to avoid it. One can resist injustice nonviolently, or one can resist by violence. To use violence is to increase injustice. To accept it is to perpetuate it. To avoid it is impossible. To resist by intelligent means, with an attitude of mutual responsibility and respect, is, according to the prophets and to history, much the better choice, since attitudes cannot be changed by avoidance, by complete or continuous acceptance, or by stupidity and violence.
Make a choice in the megaphone. Hearts with a purpose, we rise to the calling inside. Another line won't resign, this is our time. Look around, hear the sound, we're an earthquake. We're fueling the currents. The truth is our cry. We are rising for our lives. They won't stop the time this time. For our power is our light, and the strength to say what's right. So we shout, side by side we have arrived. We will survive. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Old thought, new hate, want to turn away. Long halls, build walls, and not bridges. Tomorrow's too late. See the beat on the street, 'cause we're here to stay. Not a pulse, there's a shot. It's the moment. The breath that's been silenced now knows what to say. We are rising for our lives. They won't stop the time this time. For our power is our light, and the strength to say what's right. So we shout, side by side we have arrived. We will survive. We will survive. We will survive. I am one voice but not alone, showing up, make a choice in a megaphone. Hard to get the purpose I rise to the calling inside. Rise to the calling inside.
So the shape and flow of my remarks this morning is pretty straightforward. I'm going to spend the first 2/3 of the sermon retelling the story of the journey of reconciliation of 1947. And then I'm going to conclude with some questions I'd like us to reflect on, as well as an invitation. When we think about the beginnings of the civil rights movement, many of us think about 1955, when Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on the bus, and how Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., then just 26 years old, led and organized the Montgomery bus boycott. Our story this morning begins in a similar fashion, but 11 years earlier. It begins with Irene Morgan. On July 16, 1944, Irene Morgan boarded a bus in Virginia that was bound for Maryland. She sat in the front of the bus and was told to sit in the back. She refused, and when the police were called, the story goes that they handed her an arrest warrant and she tore it up and threw it out the window of the bus. 2 years later, in 1946, the Supreme Court issued a landmark ruling in Morgan versus Virginia. The 7-1 decision found that segregation on interstate buses was unconstitutional. In the following year, 1947, two organizations, FOR and CORE, sponsored a direct action aimed to test whether the Morgan ruling would be followed. One of the two organizations was FOR, the Fellowship of Reconciliation, which was founded in 1915 as an organization to support pacifists and conscientious objectors during World War I, and then expanded its scope to be more of a across-the-board justice organization. In the early 1940s, two of the Fellowship of Reconciliation staff members, James Farmer and George Hauser, founded CORE as a spin-off organization. CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality, was committed to organizing for racial equality through direct action, and it was a key organization, a key leadership organization during the civil rights movement. Its 50 original members included 28 men and 22 women, a mix of black and white. CORE's founding members included Polly Murray of local fame, as well as, I want to point out, Unitarian minister Homer Jack. So FOR and CORE sponsored the Journey of Reconciliation, the first Freedom Ride, in 1947. Their plan called for 16 men, 8 African American and 8 white, to travel by bus to test the Morgan Supreme Court ruling. Their journey would take them across the Upper South, starting in Washington, D.C., and then traveling down to Durham, then west to Nashville, then north to Louisville, Kentucky, and then finally back east across Virginia, returning to D.C. In planning the journey of reconciliation, the women of CORE advocated for the freedom rides to include both women and men. However, they were outvoted. And so on April 10th, 1947, April 10th, 75 years ago today, 16 men left Washington, D.C. by bus. The 16 were, I'm going to read their names, Bayard Rustin, who provided the reading for this morning, George Hauser, founder of CORE, Dennis Banks, James Peck, Andrew Johnson, Conrad Lynn, Wallace Nelson, Eugene Stanley, William Worthy, Nathan Wright, Lewis Adams, Ernest Bromley, Joe Felmet, Worth Randall, Igal Rudenko, and Unitarian minister Homer Jack. They didn't travel all together, but traveled in smaller groups, taking different buses. They sat in pairs with one black man and one white man sitting side by side. During the journey, the riders were arrested at multiple different points regularly along the trip. And on Saturday, April 12th, a group of riders came to Chapel Hill. Those riders included Andrew Johnson, James Felmet, Bayard Rustin, Igal Rudenko, and James Peck. Saturday night in Chapel Hill was a bit of a respite for the riders. Some of them had been arrested earlier that same day in Durham. And in Chapel Hill, they were greeted with warmth and hospitality by Reverend Jones and by other church leaders from the Chapel Hill Presbyterian Church. Greeted with hospitality. That evening, they met at the church with Reverend Jones and students and professors from UNC. In a documentary about the journey of reconciliation called You Don't Have to Ride Jim Crow, the riders recalled dancing that evening. So it was clear that they had a festive time on Saturday night. And the next morning, on Sunday, April 13th, they attended worship at Chapel Hill Presbyterian. Then they went to the bus station to continue on the journey. When they boarded the bus, Andrew Johnson and James Felmet sat together in the front seat. The driver asked Johnson to move to the back, and Felmet told the driver that he was his friend riding with him. After they refused to move, the police were called. The police station was right across the street, and the police came on board and arrested both Johnson and Felmet. Next, two things happened. First, many of the passengers on the bus seemed supportive of the Freedom Riders. In fact, when the bus driver tried to hand out witness cards, one white woman said, "You don't want me to sign one of those. I'm a damn Yankee, and I think this is an outrage." At that point, Bayard Rustin and Igal Rudenko, who were sitting towards the back, decided that they would move to the front and move into the seats formerly occupied by Johnson and Felmet. And the bus driver, when he came back on the bus, had to repeat the whole process of going back to the police station, calling the police over, and arresting Rustin and Rudenko. But another thing was happening at the same time. A group of cab drivers who had been hanging around the bus station noticed that the bus was delayed, learned what was going on board, and began to gather as a mob. Following the 4 arrests, James Peck, a 5th rider, stepped off the bus to call Charlie Jones. Peck was, during that time, surrounded by a group of 5 cab drivers, and one of them punched him in the face. Reverend Jones drove to the police station, and the Freedom Riders jumped in his car, and Jones sped back to the Presbyterian manse, not our manse, but the manse for the Presbyterian Church, which was then off Franklin Street. They were pursued by 2 carloads of cab drivers, armed with sticks. And so we have a chase down Franklin Street. Jones and the Freedom Riders, followed by 2 carloads of angry men. The Freedom Riders managed to get into the manse moments before the cab drivers arrived. One of the cars drove up on the lawn. In fact, the Freedom Riders say that they expected the car to crash into the house. And the cab drivers got out of their cars. Some of them picked up stones to use as weapons. And they gathered and milled about outside the house, but decided not to attack. Just as they began to disperse, threatening calls began to come into the parsonage. One threatened that they would burn the house down if the Freedom Riders did not leave Chapel Hill. Another call threatened Reverend Jones and his family. Jones called the police and arranged for cars to take the Freedom Riders on to Greensboro that night, not by bus, but by car. Police escorted the Freedom Riders all the way to the county line. And Jones, meanwhile, packed up his family and left town for 2 weeks due to the threats made against him. There's another chapter of this story. The next month, the 4 Freedom Riders who were arrested returned to face charges against them stemming from the arrest. They were each found guilty of disturbing the peace, and each sentenced to 30 days of hard labor on the chain gang in North Carolina. Bayard Rustin journaled this experience on the chain gang that was then serialized by a paper in the North. And the expose of his 22 days on the chain gang, 22 days with good behavior. The expose was so shocking that it led to prison reforms in the state of North Carolina. 6 years later, Charlie Jones, our Charlie Jones, was forced out of his position at Chapel Hill Presbyterian. 50 families left the church in protest and founded this church, the Community Church of Chapel Hill, in 1953, calling Jones as their minister. And in that role with us, Jones continued to organize for racial justice in the South as a member of the Fellowship of Southern Churchmen, which was an organization supporting racial equality. And Jones, along with several members of this community church, went on to play a key role in supporting the efforts to desegregate restaurants in Chapel Hill, the sit-ins of 1963 and 64. And that is the story of the journey of reconciliation and the events which transpired here, right here in Chapel Hill, 75 years ago this week. Second week of April, 1947. What might we do with this story? The first thing I want to name is sort of some feelings of pride. Charlie Jones, if not the hero of the story, is certainly a key actor in a good guy role. And Reverend Jones is our hero. He is synonymous with our existence as a church, our legacy as a church. And isn't it wonderful that one of the 16 Freedom Riders was a Unitarian minister? So be honest with me, how many people here experienced a little bit of pride in the telling of that story? I did. Pride can feel really good, and a certain amount of it is probably healthy, but it can also be very seductive. Because if we hear this story and say, oh good, we were on the right side of history, then we can kind of avoid looking critically at ourselves and just sort of say, well, it was the other people who were the bad guys, which is probably not a healthy or spiritually whole way of seeing things.
The fact is, during the 1947 Freedom Rides across 4 states, Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Kentucky, the Freedom Riders faced a lot of opposition, but only one incident of physical violence here in Chapel Hill. Does that mean we're the worst? We're the worst city in the South? No. But it does mean we ought to interrogate stories of our own innocence, our own special enlightenment, or our own special status. Another thing I'd like to invite us to reflect on is the idea of individualism and the idea of being parts of a group, our connections and our relationships. The story has many good heroes. Bayard Rustin, Reverend Charlie Jones, Polly Murray, Homer Jack, there's that pride. And the white woman on the bus. And some villains as well. The cab driver who punched James Peck, the other cab drivers, perhaps the bus driver, perhaps the officer who arrested the Freedom Riders, perhaps the judge who sentenced them to 30 days hard labor. But I think it's funny. I think it's funny that we can feel pride for proximity to some of these individuals, while at the same time holding on to individualism. Isn't that weird that we would feel like pride for our relationships, while at the same time insisting that we're each individuals who act either good or bad? The reality is that change happens through organization and relationship. So this is the story of For and Core. It's the story of the Chapel Hill Presbyterian Church and the Community Church of Chapel Hill. It's the story of the NAACP and the UU Justice Ministry of North Carolina. The truth is, we are both individuals as well as parts of groups. So I want to conclude with an invitation. This afternoon, a small group of us, including the minister of the University Presbyterian Church, Jared McLaughlin, who I've been happy to get to know and work with, as well as James Williams from the Orange County Community Remembrance Project, and I are going to be leading a walking tour and retelling this story. We're going to be starting not what the announcement said 2 weeks ago. We're going to be starting at on the front steps of the United Presbyterian Church, gathering at 1:45 with a prompt 2 o'clock start. The walk will take us down to Columbia and Rosemary, the site of the bus station. We're going to walk that journey that they traveled up to down Franklin Street to the Presbyterian Manse and then back. It'll last about an hour, and you're welcome to join us. We're going to be retelling this story. As we go, I invite you to reflect on this story from 75 years ago, on what it means for us today, how it might inspire us, humble us, and lead us to lives of love and courage. Thank you for inviting me to retell this story from our community's past this morning. Amen. And blessed be. And let us sing together our closing hymn. It's number 116, I'm on my way. I invite you to rise in body or in spirit as we sing together.
Okay, if you'll remain standing, let's thank the choir, the community church band, and all who made the service possible. Please remember to place your donation to the church in the offering baskets as you exit or donate online. Two more things. A correction for those of you online, the Sunday small groups social is at 12 noon. And finally, we have two services next week, 9:30 at the Memorial Rock and 11:15 here. Okay, now, for the words of extinguishing the chalice, they're in your order of service. Please join me if you wish to do so. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. If you wish to hold hands during Shalom, put your hands out, and if not, cross your heart. And let's join to sing Shalom. Shalom, my friends, shalom.